Welcome everyone. In this lecture, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how to download and install MySQL 8 on your Windows computer. And I'll also navigate and show you how you can download and install on Mac OS or Linux, right? So all you need to do as a first step is just navigate to mysql.com. That's the URL. And once you're on this page, you will see the downloads menu. Just simply click on downloads and you will, on the bottom here, notice there's an option called MySQL Community Downloads. So once you click on that, this is where you can actually choose the MySQL installer for Windows. And there are other options as well that I'm going to get to them later, but just for the purpose of installation, pretty straightforward. Just navigate and click on MySQL installer for Windows. And this will give you the latest version, which is MySQL 8 is the final series with the MySQL installer. So as of MySQL 8.1, use a MSQL products MSI or zip archive. So this is the first one that you're gonna get. So if I scroll down, you notice you only get the version 8 option. And here you can select the operating system as Windows that we already selected. And then simply two options are provided to you, which is the Windows 32-bit MSI installer x86, and of course the Windows x86 32-bit MSI installer. So I'm going to go ahead and use the full installer version because that's what I would like, and that's how it's going to work. So click on that and just say no thanks. Just start my download, and this is going to go ahead and start the download process. And what this will do is open up a window where you can actually use and download and save the installer. So I'm going to click on save, and once saved, it's actually going to go ahead and download, verify the progress right here, one download in progress. And as soon as it's downloaded, what we need to do next is to simply click on the execute. So it will go ahead and open up the installer for us. There we go. So we have the MSQL installer downloaded. So it's going to go ahead and click on the downloads option here. And this is going to go ahead and execute and open up the MySQL installer. And it will simply just straightforward navigate, but there's a few important things that I want to show you once we actually get to that. And then which areas or which options, which tools are we actually going to install. So do you want to allow this app to make changes to the device? Simply go ahead and click yes. And this is going to start the installation process. Perfect. So this is the first option or step within the MySQL installer, choosing a setup type. Now notice you can either install the server only, client only. You can do a full custom installation, which includes, of course, everything, including the MySQL server, the shell, the router, the workbench, documentation, samples, and examples, right? Or you can choose a custom installation where you can actually choose which two options. So typically, we just need the server and the workbench, okay? So in this example, I'm going to go ahead and do full. And you can also do full because it gives you the documentation and some samples as well. So for learning purposes, I would recommend choosing the full install. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Click next. And notice here are the options. Shows you that everything is ready to install. In other words, it's going to install the server, the workbench, shell, router, documentation, and samples. And if you choose not to install any one of those, you can of course uncheck boxes. So let's click on execute. And this is going to start the installation process. Perfect. So once everything is completed for the installation options, the products that you actually selected, just simply click on next. And this will now tell you the product configuration. So it's going to walk you through each of the following products. So types and networking, this is where you can configure your server type. Notice this is default. You can have the development computer, or you can have the server or dedicated computer. And there are other options like manual, you could do so. But I'm going to leave it as development computer, and this is TCP/IP port 3306. For all DB, the default port is 3306. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next, just asking me for a password, which I will need to specify to log on to the instance once the installation is complete. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next using strong password encryption. And this is where I can give the password. So I'm going to go ahead and simply choose a password. And in my case, it's called Claydesk, right? Even though it's a weak password, but you can have a stronger password if you like. You can also add MySQL user accounts, but we're going to leave it as default because this is for your learning purposes. So click next. And here you can give it a Windows service name. I'm going to leave it as MySQL 80. And this is going to start the MySQL server at system startup. Now, if you uncheck this option, you'd have to manually start the MySQL, but leave it checked, especially if you're working with MySQL or Workbench all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And this is simply the server file permissions, where you're granting access to the user running the Windows service and the administrators group only. So click next. And this is where it's going to go ahead and apply the configuration. So let's execute, and it's going to go one at a time, writing the configuration file, updating the Windows firewall rules, and then adjusting the Windows service. And this is, again, all backend processes that MySQL installer does for you. Great. So once the configuration operation is completed, the last step is finish. And it's going to go ahead and, of course, click next. And it's just going to verify everything, for example, the router configuration and all the other products that you're actually using. So I'm going to go ahead and finish. Next. This is where it's going to go ahead and connect to the server. So it's a standalone server running on port 3306. I'm going to go ahead and give it the password that I earlier gave. So it's the same password, and the username is root. I'm going to check it, and connection is successful. Click next. And this is where it's going to check and see if there are any features installed that need configuration, or run scripts as well. So let's execute. It's going to go ahead and execute and start the checking process. And this is just, again, pretty straightforward, just a step at a time. You just need to know exactly what you're installing, since we did a full installation. Therefore, it's going to go ahead and ask us things in detail. But if you were to install just the server and the Workbench, most of these things are not there. It's just going to skip all of these and get you directly to the finish line. So let's go ahead and click next. And this is the installation procedure has been completed. It's going to start the MySQL Workbench after setup. And it is also going to start the MySQL shell after setup. So let's finish. Perfect. So notice it starts the shell, and this is the MySQL shell 8. And at the same time, it's going to go ahead and start the welcome to MySQL Workbench. And both options are available. And I'm going to get to shell later once I add those lectures, but let's maximize this. And you'll notice you're already connected to your local host on port 3306. This is your local instance called MySQL 8.0. You can, of course, add more connections if you need to, or you can delete by right click and then delete the connection and then add the connection again. So that's pretty straightforward. So this is how you would go about installing the MySQL 8 Workbench, the router, and the shell. And in the next lesson, I'm going to go ahead and actually start using this. So I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions with this. Let's move to the next lesson.